Mechwarriors of light mechs live short but glorious lives. While this one line is frequently uttered in videos on this channel, it fits particularly well with the plucky 30-ton Javelin. Crafted originally by the bold and brave folks within the Light Division at Storm of Anger Assemblies, the Javelin was intended as a recon light mech that could still hit hard in a clinch to leave an impression. And over the course of its hundreds of years of existence, it has done that and more. First produced on Calf within the Terran hegemony in 2751, the brand new Javelins got to witness the last few violent years of the Star League and the following incredibly super violent years that followed those with the First Succession War. Immediately, the Javelin was popular, though the biggest customer by far was House Davion, which sought to quickly distribute them across their AFFS units. But why was this little mech so popular, and what made the Javelin so impactful that it led to the aphorism, sneaky as a javelin? Let's find out. Constructed from a Durlite 246 chassis wrapped around a GM180 Fusion engine, the JVN-10N Javelin could move quickly, though not nearly as quickly as many of its peers in the light mech class. To aid it in staying alive for long enough to transmit that important information back to HQ, 6 Rawlings 95 jump jets were installed into the mech's legs and center torso, which allowed the Javelin to leap up to 180 meters. Offering at least modest coverage, 4 tons of Starguard 1 standard plate armor protected the Javelin's sensitive bits and squishy Mechwarrior inside. With 10 single heat sinks and 5 tons of gyro and cockpit, whatever those are used for, that left a grand total of 8 tons of remaining mass for weapons, ammunition, or equipment. While I'm sure the temptation was there to slap some medium and small lasers on this thing and call it a day, the Javelin design team went a different route with the 10N. In what I suspect was the result of a sweetheart deal with the producer, 2 Aerolite short-range missile 6-racks were installed into the mech, 1 in each side torso along with a dedicated ton of ammunition. These SRM-6s helped give the Javelin its distinct chest-heavy look, which set it apart from its peers. The 10 single heat sinks were adequate for general use, as firing both SRM launchers on the run was heat neutral. However, if the 6 jump jets came into play, some minor heat management was necessary. It's nothing outside the bounds of General Succession War's antics, though. The 10N's combined 24 possible missile damage was impressive, though obviously tempered by the nature of the missiles themselves. The launchers also contributed to some complaints from mechwarriors who felt the mech's center of balance was too far forward. To compensate for this, the Javelin's gyro needed to be properly calibrated, especially when the mech was running at top speed. Even with this odd little quirk, the Javelin proved itself valuable, and every AFFS commander wanted at least a few with which to play. At that moment, the Javelin and Clint barreled out of the ravine, shot to the sky on wings of vented plasma plumes, and laid into the trebuchet with missiles, lasers, and autocannon shells. The pair worried armor plating all across the Peacemaker's flank, but one of the Javelin's SRMs burrowed through a chewed-up section of the Treb's left elbow bend. Cyril winced as the explosive force detonated through exterior seams from inside the arm, blasting away the few armor plates like roof shingles shorn off in high winds. Smoke trailed from the busted seams, and a second later the whole limb tore off in a sympathetic explosion as missiles in the arm's ammo feed mechanism ignited. High Value Target, Battlecore Anthology 5, page 199, by Philip A. Lee. Though the Javelin was not exclusive to the Davions, it was an uncommon sight elsewhere. The rarity of the mech only increased after Ameris' Rimworld's troops trashed the Javelin production lines in 2774. That's only 23 years of production before the Javelin spigot was turned off. Those already created would need to fend off extinction on their own, with mech techs forced to jerry-rig replacement parts, armor, and weaponry. There wouldn't be a new production line set up for the plucky Javelin until 3055, so what was out there was out there. Thankfully, the Javelin had everything it needed to stay alive. Except lots of armor, but anyway. Used primarily for scouting and recon duties, the Javelin could confidently handle other scouts that might wander into its short-range missile arcs. While the 4 tons of armor is 3 tons shy of the max possible on a 30-ton battle mech, it was deemed acceptable by most mech warriors who knew not to stick around long enough to take copious amounts of incoming fire. She pulled into her trigger, flooding his left knee with emerald fire. It was an exercise, so each laser was set at 1/10 power, but together they added up to almost half power. She saw armor melt and start to run from the vulnerable knee joint, heard sounders cursing over the general channel. She cut the fire, pivoted, and hit her jump jets all in one fluid motion, just as Saunders' SRMs smashed into the place she had been standing. If she had let him bring his weapons to bear, this fight would be over before it began. She feathered her right jets mid-jump, imparting a rotation to her Javelin. She bent her legs to take the impact. Even so, the blow to her chest almost took her out. Red Kopesh, page 32 by Stephen Mohan, Jr. Even though the Javelin had a very short initial production run of just a few decades, that didn't prevent some tinkering, largely by the Davions, to specialize the Javelin for specific missions. In fact, the first official variant for the mech came just 1 year into its production. In 2752, the Javelin 10A was spotted, which was structurally the same as the 10N, with the same movement profile, 10 heatsinks, and 4 tons of armor. However, the 2 SRM-6 launchers were sacrificed in favor of a long-range missile 15 rack, along with 1 ton of ammunition in the right torso. While this definitely opens up the possibility for the Javelin to briefly act as a fire support unit, it doesn't eliminate its usefulness as a scout. One could foresee the possible deployment of Javelins as forward scouts that are able to fire their LRMs even further into enemy territory before scooting back to the rear for resupply. This pestering action could be a headache for those on the receiving end. The thought of a lance of these little buggers running around is rather disconcerting. With this said, apparently the 10A wasn't a super common variant, so encounters were likely few in number. Another attempt to tweak the design in 2819 resulted in the somewhat notorious 10F variant known as the Fire Javelin. It sought to improve the endurance of the Javelin on long missions by removing the 2 SRM-6 launchers and replacing them with 4 medium lasers. This left 4 tons of mass, which were invested in 2 additional heatsinks and 2 more tons of standard armor plating. This tougher Javelin could operate indefinitely so long as the Mechwarrior had plenty of coffee and granola bars. Though I would recommend not going with the chocolate-covered variety because of the downside of the Fire Javelin, which was a rather unforgiving heat curve even in general use. The 4 medium lasers maxed out the mech's 12 heatsinks, so running and gunning left the mech at 2+ heat into the red. Leaping on the jump jets only intensified that heat buildup. Still, in the grand scheme of things, it's really actually not that bad. It was stated in the lore that many pilots, quote, ran afoul of heat problems when trying to use the jump jets in sync with the lasers. This seems a little bit hyperbolic and perhaps more of a Mechwarrior skill issue than a battle mech issue. She watched as the Javelin put a flight of missiles into the warehouse and then turned toward the beach. Even holding was going to be hard. The Javelin reached the edge of the beach and stopped. Of course, it could slog through the sand, wade through the shallow cove without covering up the SRMs in its torso, but why throw away the light machine's principal advantage, its tremendous mobility? Not when the big boys were coming. The Javelin's task was obvious. Put the fear of God into the island's defenders while the assault's real muscle safely disembarked. Blue Waters, Battlecore Anthology 5, page 291, by Stephen Mohan, Jr. It shouldn't come as a surprise that with so many Javelins filling the ranks of the armed forces of the Federated Suns, those most commonly having to deal with these little buggers were the military units of the Draconis Combine. On the planet Marduk during the War of 3039, a DCMS unit ended up on the receiving end of Javelin Fury when they found themselves cut off from the rest of the 8 Galadon regulars. A recon lance consisting of 3 javelins and a Valkyrie stumbled across an armored company and saw the opportunity to hammer it even though their light mechs were technically outgunned. Using their speed, agility, and luck of the light mech warrior, they harassed and hammered the dragon's forces. The Valkyrie offered its modest long-range LRM fire from distance, while the javelins leapt in on plumes of jump jet plasma to unleash their missiles into the disorganized enemy. Instead of skirting the combined tanks, the javelins blew through the unit, firing SRMs as they ran. This prevented coordinated counterfire, and several Demolisher tanks were disabled in the resulting chaos. The 3 javelins successfully ran back and forth through the combined unit for 3 minutes before one of the javelins was finally taken down by a lucky autocannon hit. As the Davion mechs fell back, 6 Demolishers and 2 Behemoth tanks had been disabled and were abandoned. That's pretty good return on investment. The Hatchetman was definitely the better warrior. As the duo moved closer, the Hatchetman pilot used the bulk of the javelin to conceal the movement of his arms, especially the one with the hatchet. When the javelin attacked, however, the Hatchetman was there almost immediately. The javelin began to smash both arms down on the Shadowhawk's head in an attempt to finish Rose with a rain of blows to the cockpit. Main event, page 125, by James D. Long. Due to the lack of production and perhaps the Javelin already being near its ideal form, the Inner Sphere wouldn't see another official Javelin variant until 3049. The mantle had been passed to Jalistar Aerospace, who was tasked with producing a new Javelin for the AFFS using the latest and greatest in Helm Memory Core upgrades. How successful they were in doing that is up for debate. The last of the 10 series Javelins was the 10P, and it looked a lot like the original 10N, except that it pulled a left torso-mounted SRM-6 launcher in favor of 2-streak SRM-2 launchers, along with a single ton of ammunition. This differentiated loadout did offer more accurate missile strikes and saved on ammunition, which I'm sure made the AFFS logistics officers very happy. This being said, a few more years would need to pass before the Javelin received more Helm Memory Core love. A more substantial change arrived in 3053 with the construction of the JVN-11A, upgraded version of the Fire Javelin. This gem of a mech benefited from the installation of 10 double heat sinks and 5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, providing 89 points of protection. Both of these changes facilitated the installation of 7 standard medium lasers across the side torsos and right arm of the battle mech. The 11A could run and fire all of its medium lasers and only end up at 3+ heat into the red. Holding off on one of the lasers would make the mech heat neutral. Not too shabby when we're talking about up to 35 damage in 5 damage chunks. I've used this variant before and the enemy can ignore it at their peril. This thing eats faces. Feeling some amount of support now, the Marauder held position to trade volleys while the Javelin faded only slightly along the lateral line of the ridge that protected its lower half. Skin flushed with excitement as much as the stifling heat buildup, Doles drifted his targeting reticule away from the heavy periphery mech and over the Javelin's upper half. The reticule flashed from red to the deep gold of target lock. The Colonel rode out the heavy buffeting of 2 more PPC attacks, triggering his own weapons at the lighter machine. The Killing Fields, The Capellan Solution Volume 2, page 218 by Lauren L. Coleman. In 3054, a more scouting-focused Javelin hit the battlefield in the JVN-11B. Its designers made the bold decision to sacrifice the jump jets, leaving the mech with a 690 movement profile. I'm going to try to be fair to this machine, and I will behave myself. Structurally, it's the same as the previous 11 series variant with 10 double heatsinks and 5 tons of ferrofibrous armor. Of course, the 2 additional tons of mass usually invested in jump jets had to go somewhere, so let's see. In a partial nod to the original loadout, 2 SRM-4s split between the side torsos were the mech's main weaponry. Downgraded from the 6s, this bought enough mass for case on each side torso to protect the SRM ammunition, as well as a Beagle active probe and Guardian ECM suite. This makes our 11B the first Operation Sneaky Sneak Javelin of the day. Overall, the 11B is an effective scout, but the sacrifice of the jump jets does hobble it, even in that role. The double heat sinks are entirely wasted unless a mech is operating in a desert biome while painted black. While I recognize the value of the machine, I can't get past the loss of those jump jets. The next variant was a one-of refit owned by a scout mechwarrior and somewhat nefarious character named Robert John Farrel. He made a name for himself in the 3070s in association with the notorious bounty hunter. Piloting his specialized Javelin, Farrel made himself useful as a scout during Operation Guerrero, where the Free Worlds League reclaimed worlds and hit above their weight in the Sarna March. Unfortunately, a misidentified unit triggered a friendly fire incident which weighed heavily on Farrel's mind and ended his service for the Free Worlds League. After finding refuge on Solaris 7, he generated cash first as a private detective, but as tends to happen, the cockpit called out for its mechwarrior. Fighting in arranged matches brought in enough money to start a family, but eventually Farrel slipped into the shadier side of things on the gaming world. This is how he ended up working as a mechwarrior scout for the bounty hunter. This job would eventually lead to a premature death at the hunter's hand. If you want to check out the full story, it's in the Kerfuffle Secrets, the Blake Documents sourcebook. The Farrel Javelin was based upon an 11D chassis, but with significant upgrades. First, the use of endosteel bought 1.5 tons of mass for later, and the engine was swapped for an extra light model which saved another 3.5 tons. The jump jets were left in place, thankfully retaining their classic 696 movement profile. 11 double heat sinks were installed to keep the mech running cool, and 6 tons of standard plate armor provided 96 points of protection. Things start to get really interesting with the loadout, which consists primarily of lasers aided by a left torso targeting computer. 2 medium X pulse lasers were split between the side torsos, able to hit out to 9 hexes for 6 damage at a -3 accuracy boost thanks to the targeting computer. These are the heavy hitters, but right on their heels were 3 ER medium lasers set, 2 in the right torso and 1 in the left. Finally, a clan active probe was installed into the right torso, which facilitated the mech's use as a scout. Overall, the 11D Farrel is a powerful and accurate machine, which suffers a bit in the heatsink department. It's pretty clear that the ER medium lasers were to be used until the 2 medium X pulses could be brought into play, but in a full Alpha Strike scenario on the run, the Farrel would end up 7+ heat into the red, which is a little fuzzy but doable if you can handle the slight hit to the mech's movement speed. It's a pretty mean machine if you have the cash to build it. Vex's reports guided them in toward his position. He identified the hostiles as a panther and a firefly, probably the Caretans, and in short order reported exchanging fire with them. Nothing serious, though. The Caretans were being cautious, quite reasonable for 2 light mechs taking on a medium. As soon as they picked up the weapons fire on their external microphones, Kelly suggested JJ jump his Javelin into the vantage point and try for a visual. "We want to get the drop on them if we can," he added. The Panther was nearest. JJ gave Kelly the vector, but before Kelly could close, something spooked the Caretan. Initiation to War, page 158, by Robert N. Charette. The next official Javelin on the timeline arrived in 3070, and it looks so similar to something I might build that I'm contacting my legal team to issue a cease and desist. Once he's done playing Nerf guns in the backyard, there's going to be heck to pay. Heck to pay. The Javelin 11F was built from endosteel wrapped around an XL engine, and jump jets, of course, preserved the 696 movement. 6 tons of standard armor provided 96 points of protection, and 10 double heat sinks rounded out the structural hardware. For weaponry, the build was dominated by a snub-nosed particle projection cannon installed into the right torso. This weapon's generous range profile and scaling damage provided a fun experience for the user, never a dull moment. Should the snub-nosed PPC not be enough, 6 machine guns were installed into the 11F, 3 on each arm in paired arrays. While only accurate at extremely close range, the combined damage to a single location could break another light mech pretty quickly. Even without the arrays in effect, the MGs do pretty well for infantry, light vehicles, and even crit-seeking wounded battle mechs. The Javelin 11F is a fine machine that runs cool even while leaping its full distance and firing at PPC. There's not much I would do to it except to maybe drop the MG ammunition 1/2 ton and buy case with the savings. Our next to last official variant is the JVN 11P, and it arrived in 3101. In many ways, it represents a return to a classic form. While it did benefit from 5 tons of ferrofibrous armor, that was the mech's only fancy bit of hardware. It maintained the 696 movement with a standard fusion engine, carried 10 single heatsinks, and had a standard structure. Armed with 4 Streak SRM-2s split between the side torsos, the 11P Javelin could hit for modest damage should the missile lock gods smile upon the Mechwarrior. It's a pretty simple design, and its most noticeable trait may be its price at just 2.3 million C-bills going by Megamech. With a battle value of just 680, the 11P is a cheap add to any mech list. The Enforcer took a tentative step forward, swayed, and paused. Clearly the pilot was having trouble making the leg work properly. He'd been trying to realign the actuator circuitry, trying to find a quick fix that would let the mech move freely again. Without mobility, battle mechs were nothing but massive, heavily armed targets. The pilot was so busy he didn't see Bergstrom's Valkyrie or Ryu's Javelin leaping over the fence to land less than 20 meters away. The 2 light mechs opened fire with everything they had at close range, and in a matter of seconds the Enforcer was riddled with a dozen major hits. Lucci saw the pilot punch out just before the autocannon's magazine blew. Blood of Heroes, page 208 and 209, by Andrew Keith. Our last official variant for the Javelin is the JVN-12N, and it is as close to an ill-clan variant as we're going to get with the introduction date of 31/21. It's definitely a more technologically advanced interpretation of the battlemech as it takes advantage of Endosteel, a more powerful XL engine, 10 double heatsinks, and 5.5 tons of light ferrofibrous armor. The new movement profile of 8-12-8 sets the 12N apart from any of its previous iterations, and we haven't even gotten to the clan weaponry yet. This variant benefited from the installation of 2 clan-spec short-range Missile 6 racks split between the side torsos, each fed by their own ton of ammunition, which were both stored in the right torso along with Case 2. As fun as that is, the 12N even had target acquisition gear installed into the open-head critical location as a nod to its scouting roots. We did remember it was a scout, right? Right? The 12N rates highly on the fun factor because who doesn't want to run around a battlefield at high speed, shooting missiles and laser spotting for artillery. Overall, the 11P looks very close to the mech in its ideal advanced form. Sure, it's expensive at 5.5 million C-bills, but the battle value is just shy of 800 and those SRM-6s are quality producers. Heat isn't an issue even if leaping the full 8 hexes, and the Case 2 can keep the mech alive should that right torso take an unlucky hit. If you haven't given the 12N a try, now may be a good time. Of course, I couldn't leave good enough alone and took a crack at creating my own Javelin variant. Hopefully it offers something not easily found elsewhere, but you can be the judge. The entirely non-canon and unofficial JVN-11MF benefits from Endosteel and an XL engine. I tend to be more forgiving of light mechs with Inner Sphere XL engines because if you're going to be going after one hit anyway, you might as well be going as fast as possible. The classic 696 movement profile was retained with the jump jets and 10 double heatsinks offered plentiful cooling. The last structural change was the use of 5.5 tons of standard plate armor. As far as weapons go, the primary damage dealers are a pair of clan-spec ER medium lasers, which can head out to 15 hexes for 7 damage apiece. At closer range, things get very interesting with the installation of 6 SRM-2 launchers split between the side torsos and feed from 2 tons of ammunition. I went ahead and marked one of them as Inferno missiles so you don't have to do that later on your own. You're welcome. Finally, an anti-missile system was added to the right torso which feeds from the 1 ton of ammunition next to it. If all the missiles hit true, the possible alpha strike damage at close range for the 11MF is 38, which is not too shabby. That will push things on the heat scale, leaving the mech at 4+ heat into the red, but that's just fine without any movement or aiming penalties unless you're messing around for multiple turns. I think the 11MF is an interesting take on the design, which plays into the beginnings of the gradual meshing of Inner Sphere and clan tech that we can expect as we march deeper into the Clan era, whether you like it or not. If you want to give the Javelin 11MF a try, I've included a Dropbox link to the record sheet down below. Let me know how it performs. The mule was dropping slowly now, her engines flaring blue-white as she fought blue water's gravity. The vessel was maybe 20 or 30 meters above the Ferrocrete landing pad on the east side of the island, showing a bottom-side aspect. She was painted white with a stylized blue IE on her underbelly and on each of the cargo doors. "I know it looks like yours," snapped Janice. "The pirates probably captured the real supply ship and substituted." Wallace jerked his arm free of her grip. "You're mad, woman!" He was practically frothing at the mouth. "I'll see your contract voided. You will find..." And at that very moment, one of the mule's roll-up doors opened and a portly Javelin painted in jungle camo came drifting down on a column of golden plasma. The light machine's pilot fired a double flight of SRMs. Blue Waters, Battlecore Anthology No. 5, page 289, by Stephen Mohan, Jr. So why do we love the Javelin? This is a tough one because at a glance there are plenty of other light mechs out there that can do the recon scouting job better than this 30-ton superstar. From its ungainly appearance to its ability to leap in and out of trouble seemingly on a whim, the Javelin shouldn't work as well as it does. I suspect the twin SRM-6s go a long way to feeding a visceral desire for explosions, but this isn't a psychology channel and I'm not your priest or lawyer. You keep those explodey thoughts to yourself. The Javelin is a staple of FedSun's units and a good wildcard light battle mech across the inner sphere. I think that's why we love it. But I'm curious what you think. Is the Javelin your light scout mech of choice, or is it a pass? Let me know down in the comments and we'll keep the discussion going. Big thanks to the MechFrog Discord server community that always has such well-painted models to share for the upcoming week's topic. If you'd like to join, I'll add the server link to the video notes below. Come hang out with us for discussion, memes, and the occasional debate over flamers versus machine guns. If you thought the video was worthwhile, hitting the like and subscribe button lets YouTube's algorithm know that it's worth sharing with others, and you'll be much more likely to see my nonsense in the future. With views and ad revenue down across gaming YouTube sector, going one step further and supporting the channel through Ko-fi or becoming a YouTube member is increasingly important for keeping the nonsense flowing. For all those who already have, thank you. It's really important and I appreciate it. It means a lot and every little bit helps. With that, I'll say have a great week and please go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.